And we are live. Welcome everybody to another session where we're gonna learn how to improve your development cycle. My name is Juan, and today I want to bring a very interesting perspective for you. Whenever you're doing development, you always work like in a black box where you're doing a lot of stuff, but and the end user gets to see what you're doing. Sometimes they get to tell you you're doing it wrong. On the other hand, we have the black box, engineers around you who tells you that some parts of your code are not correct and are not working as expected. But there is a point in between. That is people that is specialized in testing your application and making sure that you don't have any gaps left. And that is the QA. The quality analysts of any company are the people that are most experienced in finding those flaws in your code and the things you're doing. And that's the reason today we're going to talk just about that. We're going to talk to that has tremendous experience and has tremendous insights in the most common mistakes developers make. So we're looking forward to touch base on those points and then perhaps give you a better perspective on how you can do better development. So today we have Larissa with us. Larissa is a person I met in Parkside, where I currently work. She's a QA manager there. And Larissa has extensive experience testing lots of things out there. And across conversations, we just touched base on points where she kind of mentioned to me some of the things I could be doing better. And I said, well, this might actually be very interesting for a lot of people out there. So today we have Larissa. Larissa, welcome. Thank you very much for coming over and for joining me today.
Thanks for the invite, Juan.
Absolutely, absolutely. So first of all, let's acknowledge a little bit that we have 12 people watching. That's really nice. Thank you very much for joining. If you want to let me know or let us know where you're coming from, where you're connected from, just type it in the comments. You can ask any questions at any time. And in fact, if you ask questions, you get points, which is good. Those points are worth nothing, but that still you get points. Maybe at the end we give you something for free. We'll think about it. Regardless, one of the things that I wanted to share with you is some of the points that Larissa brought to me, and we're going to discuss those points one by one. And let's get to it. So, first of all, code fearlessly, but revisions more carefully. Well, this is something we initially said on this tweet that Larissa mentioned to me. Perhaps some developers out there are making a lot of contributions and so on, but sometimes they're not careful enough when they're making a pull request. Sometimes they just want to commit the code and call it a day, and they often make mistakes that people like Larissa are able to spot right away and fix. Larissa, why do you think developers and are sometimes just rushing over to finish what they're doing and then just immediately get the job done without actually being careful about the things they're pushing to their branches? Why do you think this is the case?
I'd say it's somehow a natural thing, right? You just want to get stuff done. So I can't blame anyone for that. And it's also good to do prototyping, right? And even put those prototypes out there for developers or for other developers or QA person or your product owner or whoever. But you have to distinguish between, is this a prototype and this is buggy, but just look at it? Or is this a pull request and should this go to your master branch or a develop branch, right? So you have to distinguish between those things. And if it's a pull request that should go into your live system, you just have to be careful there.
Yeah, I think perhaps what happens is that there's not a clear distinction between these two. Like a prototype is something quick that you need to test, and an actual contribution as a pull request. Perhaps one of the things that happen is that I don't know, maybe developers are not always thinking of edge cases or edge scenarios, right? Like abnormal flows in the application, and they're concentrated in just the typical flow they are asked to do, and they don't consider other steps. What happens there, and what happens when you find these edge cases? How do you find those?
I mean, that's somehow what testers are for, right? At some point, so that's also somehow developers think, nah, the tester will find it anyways.
Yeah.
But that's not a good attitude.
No.
So having um, testers are trained for finding edge cases, right? But you can also like work with the tester together and find edge cases, because depending on the software you're developing, you basically stumble over the same edge cases over and over again, right? Is it, I don't know, my app doesn't work on small devices or looks shitty on small devices, or my website doesn't look good on, I don't know, IE 11, but I still have to support it there. Or maybe the decision is, okay, not support it anymore. Or I don't know, if it's some special characters you always stumble over, or I don't know, Chinese characters or whatsoever, right? So it depends on the application there, but I would say it's mostly in your application you're developing, it's mostly the same edge cases. So you could actually prepare a checklist of those edge cases, and so to prevent those issues then.
Do you think developers, for example, when responsive design or like doing an application that works in different screens, they should have some kind of checklist that they make sure that it's working beyond the acceptance criteria that is defined on a given ticket? You think they should test in a couple of mobile devices, even if it's not explicitly stated in the acceptance criteria?
I'd say so. So these are things that go beyond acceptance criteria, right? There are some points that basically always apply. Like, I don't know, code quality or writing unit tests, or like your stuff has to work on those devices or operating systems or whatsoever. So you have to have prepared this checklist, or I at least suggest a checklist to really go over those points. And also, so I recommend that, because when I started out my career, I always forgot about those things, of course, right? So at some point you think, not again. So that's why I came up with it.
Maybe if developers were more conscious about these edge cases that you just mentioned, that you learned in the beginning of your career, they will be more mindful. I'll tell you something. One of the things I usually try to do when I'm developing an application is that whenever I to create a form, for example, I make sure that the text that is entered in a given input, it's trimmed. That is, that if somebody puts extra spaces, those extra spaces are not do not go into the database unless it's necessary. And that's just a small detail. Perhaps it won't be mentioned in the acceptance criteria of a ticket, but it's something that later on you will be able to QA and say, like, look, I enter a lot of spaces and that actually worked. This is wrong, right?
Right, that's basically what it's about, right? So it's all the small details in between these acceptance criteria, because acceptance criteria is just the best case scenario, right? That's what the customer wants to have, but we have to think about all those little details in between, which makes the job interesting, right?
Nice. Talking about attention, or let's put it this way, talking about communication. One of the things you mentioned to me, and you've been quite opinionated about, is that through the lack of communication, we actually end up building the wrong thing. And I think you have a really strong point about it. Can you share a little bit more about this?
Sure. So it's the sweet spot between building the right thing and building the thing right. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? Building the right thing is what the customer really wants to have, right? So ideally, it's written in the acceptance criteria, but what we talk with the testers, ask for feedback. If there's something that you feel it feels just odd, it says there in the acceptance criteria I should do it that way, but it just feels odd. Talk to the people and let them know, because in the end, this will get you to a better product.
Absolutely. We're gonna make a pause. We're gonna take a look at how our viewers doing. It seems like some of them might be experiencing a little bit of lag. I'll just double check here that everything is running smoothly. Let me check over here. All's good. If anybody is having issues with the video or anything, just let us know right away on the chat. We'll be happy to fix them for you. One of the things that we also talk about is, or one of the things we wrote in the tweet was, senior developers often overestimate their skills, right? And they write more bugs than they should. Why is this the case? Why does this happen?
I mean, imagine you're a senior developer and already working on that product for years, right? So you know all those edge cases already, you know the customer already, you know the whole code base already. But still, you have to still apply all this knowledge, right? So and it's easy to get somehow sloppy when you did that already like the 100th time, and right, so it's easy to just, I don't know, now you don't need to test that. So actually it's I would say a tip for testers, if some testers are listening, challenge those senior developers, so they will really be thankful for that. I made the experience myself. It's really, if you find tricky bugs or hidden bugs, they will really appreciate it. And yeah, it's then amazing to work with them, because of course senior developers have tons of knowledge, right? So you can learn a lot from them. So
I mean, if they are nice senior developers.
oh yeah, they are.
Did you come across, without mentioning any names, of any mean developer out there that ever replied to you in the wrong manner, or was your experience mostly positive?
Um, there were for sure like heated discussions, but I would say overall it was always good, and also these heated discussions turned out to be good in the end.
Nice, nice.
So it just brought us basically closer together, and in the end, yeah, it made the QA position more present and very valuable, I would say, for the
Well,
developers.
one of the things that happened to me is that I consider myself senior, or some people consider me senior, and I still do make mistakes. I would like to
Oh,
say not because yeah, Larissa, why are you laughing? Because she
that's a surprise to me.
deja vu. No, that's funny. No, what happens to me is that I make some mistakes, but in retrospective, the reason I make these mistakes are not necessarily because I consider myself really good. At least I consider, or I have some humbleness in me still, but I'm lazy and I don't have like a really clear, transparent, and point by point structure of things that I need to check, make sure that are working. And this is something that in my team we started doing, or in our team we started doing lately, right? We have this checklist that we say, okay, before you make a pull request, make sure you double check that this is running, this is running, this is running, this is running. So make sure, I don't know, different dimensions, different browsers, make sure that, I don't know, your build is working, make sure that, you know, you're not passing information without the proper what is it called? Encryption, you name it, right? So this checklist gets me like, oh, nice, I need to check this, because otherwise you forget, or at least I forget constantly. So maybe that would help me as a developer.
yeah. So it's once that. So it's very humble of you to already have this checklist and go through this. So really awesome. But of course, there are also developers who say, I don't care. I'm lazy, and the tester will do it for me, right?
Yeah.
But it's no fun testing if you, I don't know, 1 minute later after installation, boom, right? So that's kind of waste of time. So we want to spend our time like finding the tricky stuff, right? So
Yep. Yeah. I remember you told me a story about one case in which somebody wrote a single line of code and completely, this is not allowed to say, but fucked up production. How did this
it
happen?
wasn't it. It was even the day before the release.
No shit.
So and the product got out. So yeah, actually it was a senior developer. Everyone thought like really highly of him. He
Uh-huh.
also is a great developer, and he did a one-line change, right? And I guess he got code reviewed, but never QA'd, because come on, it's a one-line change, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
What could ever go wrong there? Yeah, and actually we did the release, And like the day after that, customers started complaining that the whole plugin isn't working right. And yeah, that was done that line. So you can never be sure, even if it's a super safe one line or yeah, one word fix, you can never know, and should always really take the time to run the tests. If you have do test automation, definitely. But also as a tester, that was actually also tester's fault, right? Because we said, yeah, what could go wrong there? So yeah, invest those, I don't know, 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatsoever, and really do test everything, especially before the release then. So because even the
Maybe
one-liners are ones.
perhaps one thing that actually makes it complicated is that the fragility of the code, because some code bases are more error prone. So some of them you know pretty well and you understand. Say you're working with Angular, which is a beautiful framework, then everything it's very easy to deal with and it's declarative. But if you're suddenly, I don't know, working with vanilla JavaScript, which is also really great, but you have a code base of millions lines of code, then it's much more trickier because then, for example, you don't have TypeScript, so you don't know if something is type safe or not, and then you change those things, and then those code bases, then you need to be more careful with them. Whereas with code bases that are more resilient or let's say more robust, then I think you can just relax a little bit more on that side. So if you change a string or a HTML text, then it should be fine. But with code bases that are so fragile, then you need to be extra careful because then it happened to
Sure.
Larissa, it could happen to any of you.
It very much depends on the product you're developing, right? If
Yeah,
it's a, I don't know, 10-year-old software or something you just started working out with, then it's not so much that can go wrong, maybe, right? Yeah. Or not
absolutely.
that many side effects that can happen.
Yeah. One of the um, one of the things I also wanted to bring up, and you didn't have this here, but this occurred to me this morning, so it's a surprise. Uh, what is your take on the role of unit testing and automation testing regarding QA?
It very much depends on the team,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. So how the team constellation is, if
Yeah.
your testers are, so because there are teams like with no testers at all and only developers, but developers do testing as well.
Yeah.
I never had a strong, or I never felt very positive about this constellation, only having
Okay.
developers in the
Okay.
team, because I think developers are just born for something else, right? They want to do code. They are good at developing, and testers are really a different species, basically. So testers are so I like to have this mix of developers and QA people,
Yeah.
and then again it depends if these QA people can or are actually engineers, so can do test automation, or are pure manual testers. Um, but actually, most of the unit tests were always done by developers, as far as I saw in my career, which is, I think, also makes sense. So it's maybe good to do like pairwise, like couple up with another developer and go through the tests, because it's like good to have a second opinion on also the tests, right, and your code. And test automation, when it comes to, I don't know, UI tests whatsoever, were basically always placed at the QAs themselves. And I also think that that's a good thing, because testers are more passionate about quality, right?
Absolutely.
Which is the natural way. So also automated tests should be done by them.
Interesting, interesting. I tell you something, and I have to confess here in front of everybody, I have not been the most unit test friendly developer ever. It's thanks.
Um,
I'm sorry. Until I'm obliged and I really have to achieve 100%, but that's another story. the thing is that I felt much more comfortable after I did it, making changes in the code. So one talking about here is fragility, right? It's like how fragile is your code is how also how more error prone it is, and therefore extra careful. But overall, I wanted to also kind of touch base so quickly on the topics we already discussed. So first we said, we talked about being more careful when you make contributions, and also not rushing to make contributions, perhaps because it's the end of the day, or because you need to close the pull request super quick, or because also could be the end of the sprint. This is something that you've probably seen a lot in your experience, right?
Right. So I guess we had it today again. So it's always like rushing to finish up stuff
Right.
in the sprint, right?
Yeah.
But I also had like the experience where like one developer was working on a feature for like a sprint or two already, and then it's time for holidays, right?
Yeah.
So now you have to make a decision, right? Rush this feature in there and just go on holidays.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
give it to another person and maybe come back from holiday and nothing of your code is left because it was totally refactored and like the other person just developed it totally different, right?
Yeah.
Or does it have time to wait after your holidays and you finish up later? So, but it's definitely something you have to think about and not just rush into and finish it or just leave without telling someone about that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's usually the case. And you know, there's this, I don't know if there's a law around it. I don't know if it's Murphy's law, but the more you rush into finishing APR, the more likely edge cases and things you didn't consider are gonna pop up. At least that's my feeling. So when I'm rushing, I'm like,
definitely.
nah, I'm just gonna leave it there because I know there are things I'm not seeing that are gonna pop up, and that's usually the case. I mean, Larissa's seen this personally.
It again depends, right? If it's only the end of the sprint, you say, okay, maybe I find the bug in another sprint and it's not too bad. But especially if it's before release, you shouldn't do that because it's like we got really screwed several times with exactly doing that. And oh my God, this bug fix, and that also needs to be in there before the release. And so it's better to calm down, especially if there's the hot release phase. Think about which bug I have to admit.
This is so disappointing.
It happens to me as well. So I totally, that's actually also why I brought it up because it's one mistake I regularly.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Thank you. So so to wrap it up, so we have so these are the things I have in my mind. Help me out if I'm missing anything. So first, developers shouldn't be rushing up to close PRs. This is probably the easiest way to commit mistakes and to enter things that are not supposed to be there. Second, this is, I take from our conversation, I would say checklists are actually a good thing because they help developers double check that they are using or that the code runs correctly on different browsers, on different screens, so on and so forth. Right, the forms have the proper validations, Chinese characters, umlaut, Schlaf S. How is it called? Schlaf S.
Scharfes S.
Scharfes S.
The Scharfes S.
Yeah, that's a cool one. So those are two. Then we have two more. Seniority shouldn't help you or shouldn't make you stubborn about the mistakes you can actually make. Number 4, we have don't underestimate the impact of a line of code, of one-liners, right? Am I missing anything?
We had doing the thing right and doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
Actually, I thought I missed the implementing the thing right. Did I miss it? I don't know.
No, we talked about it.
Okay.
I mean, we can talk about it again and
It's fine.
Yeah, well, I liked it pretty much how you phrased it when you said, look, because this was epiphanistic to me in a way. When you said the acceptance criteria gives you a small context on how you're supposed to do something, and it's a narrow context. And then if you do it, it's correct within that context. But when you involve different perspectives, the context becomes bigger. And there are other eyes and other points of view that can tell you, well, yes, it is right within the context, but outside of it is no longer right. So you built the right thing within the context, but the wrong thing outside of it, which stated differently, you build the thing right, but the wrong thing.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
So it's really, the one thing is just about finding bugs, right, in your acceptance criteria, in your narrow view. So that's what happens if you basically don't talk to anyone, right?
Yep.
Neither the developer nor the QA person, everyone's reading through the acceptance criteria. This is working, this is not working, this is working. But you don't have a clue if it's actually the thing that the customer wants to have, right?
Yep.
So, and that's what you can only find out when communicating with each other, or raising questions or concerns about acceptance criteria or stuff that pops up in your mind during development.
Absolutely.
Or during
Absolutely.
the testing phase.
Yep. So I would like to open up again. Let the audience chime in if they want to. If audience, if you are watching this and you haven't realized, there is a really nice comment section on the right side, or perhaps below the video, in which you can ask any questions at this moment. This is a privilege to have Larissa here. It took me weeks to get her to join my my streaming. This is streaming right here. So just take the opportunity to ask any questions. And if you don't have any questions, that's fine as well. We will also publish a summary of this conversation, so you can just look through it and see it through. But I'm gonna ask Larissa one last question before we just wrap it up. Larissa, if you met a junior developer right now, and he asked you for one advice, which advice would this be?
That's a tricky one, but I would go with the communication.
Really?
So don't be afraid to talk to senior developers. Don't be afraid to talk to QA persons. They may screw you over immediately if they see your first pull request, right? But still, it's just feedback is what's gonna make you grow on things, right? So I would definitely go for that.
Nice. Cool. Absolutely. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the difficult situation that many of our friends are facing in the US at the moment. We feel like really sad to see all of the things that are happening over there. We want to invite also the people that are watching this video to donate if they can. There are plenty of organizations out there. There are plenty of people being really vocal about it and really helping you guide your help in the right direction. So make sure you contribute if you can. But if for the rest of you who might not be aware of the situation, through United States, we are seeing really tough times, and we really hope that they just make it through. So yeah. Okay, I see that there's no many other comments in the or questions in the chat, so I say we just call it a day. Larissa, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for gathering this knowledge and really put it in a way that it's helpful for other people to learn. I'll happily share this content with especially junior developers, who are people who are starting and have no idea how can they improve in certain ways. And I guess you bring a key perspective that people often forget about. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you for the invitation one more time. It was really a fun talk.
Absolutely.
It was amazing. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, goodbye.